Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. This is the podcast where I have a conversation with guests from the architectural community and beyond to talk about the coevolution of architecture and technology. Today, I welcome the co-founders of ArchIT, Boris Rapoport and Alex Osenenko. Boris is the CEO and Alex is head of growth. ArchIT is dedicated to supporting the unique IT needs of architecture, design, and engineering businesses. In this special partner episode, we build upon the business of architecture thread here on the podcast. The topic today is mergers and acquisitions, also known as M&A. Boris, Alex, and I discuss the importance of planning and communication in the process of acquiring or being acquired by another company, the need for continuity and quality in service delivery, the importance of involving people from various internal teams in the transition, their three-step process for transitioning the acquired company's brand, and more. Please visit getarchit.com to learn more about their services. That's getarchit.com. Boris and Alex are both stand-up guys who care about quality, proactive IT service, and I'm happy to call them my friends. Anyway, I hope you learned something new today. I know I did. And now, without further ado, I bring you Boris Rapoport and Alex Osenenko. Boris, Alex, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you guys again.
Evan, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we're talking about M&A, mergers and acquisitions. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about kind of the real world application, the nuts and bolts side of that as well, what it's actually like to go through that in a firm and what leaders should be paying attention to from the strategy all the way down so that everybody's kind of included in that process. And there's been a series of topics on this show about the business of architecture. And I should say the business of AEC, because this is wider than just an architectural audience. And ArchIT, you guys obviously service architects and engineers, small to mid-sized firms. And so this is a great topic because it's, first of all, I think it's surprising maybe to hear it on this podcast. But in this vein of the business of architecture, this is an important topic that people should at least have in their brains as something to kind of be thinking about, but also this is a very strategic topic when it comes to building a business, and the tech side of that is a piece of that. And so I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys today when we're talking about mergers and acquisitions and opportunities and strategies. And so I guess the first question that I'll start off with is, why even consider M&A? Why grow? Because that's, I think, what people think about when they think about M&A is like they're going to get bigger and they're going to acquire maybe a portfolio, maybe they're going to acquire talent, maybe they're going to acquire clients. And obviously that sounds great, but maybe you can get deeper into the subject of why consider using this as a strategy for growth.
Let me take this one, Evan. So firstly, as ArchIT, we serve architecture firms, engineer design firms. We're like strictly in AEC industry. And so we can speak to this because, number one, we went through the M&A process ourselves. In fact, we're going through it. We're towards the back end of the implementation right now, and we're not a big company. So my kind of idea was to help companies understand even smaller companies can grow through acquisition. And why even do that, right? Well, there are multiple reasons for doing that. One of them, I think the most important one for me and Boris, and it's always been the case throughout my career, is to provide opportunity and growth to your best team members, to your talent. So talent growth is the key, because if you're stuck in the same place doing the same thing and you're growing organically, which is fine, the opportunities are tiny. So your best people will look elsewhere. And that's to me is always is to provide a runway for our best team members and also attract the best talent. So number one. Number two, you can get the best talent via acquisition. In fact, one of the criteria you should use, or companies should use, is what sort of talent level are you bringing on board? Because that could be as much value as the revenue or more. Evan, you heard the term acqui-hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very popular in Silicon Valley. But we're not talking about that right now. But the idea is that you buy companies just so you can get the talent. Okay, and that's not untrue for both architecture companies, AAC companies, IT companies, what have you. Finally, what we've done throughout our business here at ArchIT, so not only are we going through the process ourselves and gone through the process in the past in my career multiple times, but we're also helping our customers go through these M&A processes from a technology standpoint. And this is where Boris shines. I mean, he's like operational genius and IT genius at the same time. And so I will let him speak to the challenge. And as I called the pre-show, how do you make implementation? How do you go from a dumpster fire into a controlled burn? It's not going to be pleasant, but it can be absolutely a controlled process where everyone wins. Well, most of us who want to win. Let's put it this way. So, Evan, I said my piece. Feel free to poke at.
Well, Boris, I would love to hear what you think, where your brain was going when Alex was talking about that stuff, because like he said, you're the implementation side. So there's the strategy, there's kind of this rainbows and unicorns outlook, right? The vision of what the M&A is going to deliver for your company. And that vision is what people buy into. But then there's like, how do we actually do it? What do we actually do on the implementation side? And maybe we'll just start at the high level. You've probably seen lots of scenarios, like really great implementation versus like just the Wild West, like Alex said, the dumpster fire version, right? So what have you seen in the gradient of, different types of implementation or lack of implementation strategy over the years?
Well, I think in order to make it a more of a controlled burn, like the leadership really needs to be intimately involved to provide direction and planning or help with planning and understanding of what kind of the end game is, and also making sure that the people that are the talent that is coming on board from another company and also your own employees feel like this is a win-win for everybody, right? Because look, it's a major change. Even, for our small company, it was a major change. It still is a major change. And people always get, scared when change is coming. So I think initially the message from the leadership needs to be, that it's going to be a win. I think Alex hit on some of those points, right? Like you will have more opportunity because we are bringing newer clients, more work, and also bringing in other people to where the organization will probably need to change, reorganize a little bit. So you will have more opportunities for kind of managing additional people, for example, right?
Let me just add one thing. We did have a plan. So this is Boris and I, we sat down, would spend days on our strategic planning once a year, and then we had obviously specific planning sessions to this M&A because we grew by 50% essentially. That's not nothing,
right?
And we mapped everything out as far as potential roles, and we don't know who we're buying and their talent, but we kind of know. We interviewed them, obviously, we have an idea, and so far, I think people are fitting right where we kind of initially thought they would, as far as their skill level and their, let's say, work ethic and ability and whatnot. But to Boris's point, the plan is the key, and then share that plan. I think transparency, and I'm going to talk about transparency all throughout this conversation, but transparency with your team members and transparency with team members on the M&A side, because I've seen some real bad situations where the owners of a company that's being acquired hold and make it a secret for way too long. I mean, there's sense of, and we can talk about a lot about communication there, because communication is really key. But transparency, you have to bite the bullet and be able to explain to your team, and then that usually where things start falling apart.
Yeah,
people just afraid to admit that there's a M&A process happening. They don't have a real good plan. The company that's acquiring is not communicating what the vision is to both their employees and the company that's being acquired employees. All those pieces just instantly start falling apart. So Boris's point on leadership needs to have a plan and very clear plan and share it with the team is I think the first step and a key step. That doesn't happen. Everything else we're going to talk about is sort of almost irrelevant.
Hmm. Well, Boris, you mentioned leadership being a key component here, and surprising people at the last minute is not a great way to communicate transparently about what's going on, and that leads to fear. Obviously, if it could be seen by the workforce as a weakness, we're being acquired. If they're the acquirees versus the acquirers, they could be seen as, oh, we must be in trouble. And so this firm is coming to save us, or maybe they're going to take over our company and get rid of us. And so there's a lot of different scenarios that people's minds automatically race to. And so early, clear communication with a solid strategy behind it is a huge part of this going smoothly. And strong leadership and having thought through all of these different puzzle pieces before that communication, that early communication even begins is super important, right?
Yeah, and I mean, timeline of this is also important because, for example, our process, and we're still on the tail end of it. I mean, it's been going on for about a year now, right?
Mm.
So initially, when we just started having the talk, even when it was just negotiating with the other side, we already communicated to our internal team that we're looking at this company. This is what we know. This is what we think is going to happen. Here's our plan. If everything is successfully going to happen. So my guys were asking me like every couple of months, it's like, when is this new company coming? Like they were
What's the
excited about
update?
that.
Yeah,
And so,
right.
and that's what Alex is talking about in terms of transparency and kind of planning for it is you want to make sure that as soon as the leadership has that idea, and I run my business more as not necessarily as a democracy, but I like to listen to what our team is saying and take their input on a lot of and hopefully implement everything that they want. Not always, right? Because sometimes, there's conflicts, things. But yeah, so basically bring that message out and hearing what people have to say and listening to their fears and their thoughts about it. I think that was a very, very big win for us in terms of then closing the merger and making sure everybody's on board.
Alex, what are some other motivators for considering doing M&A? Because you talked about growing the talent or the opportunities for the talent in the company, but there's obviously a lot of other reasons why M&A would be thought about.
Yeah. Growing the talent, I think that's like you got to anchor that as number one because your product delivery, your service quality, your output, that's how your company is judged is by what you produce, not how good of a culture you have. That's all internal. That's great. But at the end of the day, your customer will make the ultimate vote with their checkbook.
Hmm.
And if you're able to deliver and deliver better, and part of this, when people focus, the other one is the strategy focus. Let's say you're an architecture company that does just strictly residential. Maybe you do, I don't know, high-end residential, but you're thinking to go into a different vertical, a slightly different vertical. Then acquisition is the best way to get into it because you acquire the knowledge and the industry sort of history and all of the company knowledge from a firm who's in the vertical you want to acquire.
Sure.
That's another big win. But maybe you don't want to. So you have to be really, really choosy. Now, if you want to buy a company that's the same as high-end residential, that's fine. That will just grow your portfolio more horizontally rather than, more vertically, horizontally. You don't want to go to different things. So this is the strategy. The company strategy is key here. Of course, the other thing is, I'm going to talk to like founders and partners. Like, look, is it, you want the business be all about you, and that's fine. That can be. And I hear a lot of other business owners looking to build something beyond themselves, right? Looking to build maybe potentially a business that the next generation wants to take over, and it's not something usually you can't really attract your son, daughter, or whoever. Working 90 hours a week, and if everything goes through you and you're a micromanager.
Right. We talked about that a lot on this podcast. I mean, that's the kind of thing where when you think about leadership in the industry or at the firm level, how are you modeling a future that somebody wants to be a part of is a big piece of that for sure.
Exactly. And so just think about I'm thinking about my daughters, they're 9 and 12. Do they want to work a small little business that hasn't done anything for 50 years or 20 years, 15 years, where everything depends on me? No, they're absolutely looking to explore the universe of opportunities. And I want to provide them with an opportunity. They don't have to take over from me, but I'd like to give them the opportunity to take over. And that means an interesting, growing business with lots of moving parts and lots of opportunities for them to grow into the leadership position, not just assume it. So that's another thing. And I like this lead versus toil. So, if you want to lead, you got to grow. Organic and acquisition, both good ways to grow. Combined, it's truly powerful. You can do one or the other and focus on those and still do okay. But together, they're good. And finally, I'd say generational wealth, Evan. That's, people don't think about that. I have a 50-year plan for where I'm going with this. I'm not in any hurry, but I want to build something because for generations, I do. It doesn't need to be something like fantastic, $1 billion trust fund, but I do want to pass on some security to my immediate family as well as to the wife. So those are the motivations that typically will go after. So people, opportunity, strategic opportunity. And then obviously building a business that can survive you, goes beyond you, and that's building generational wealth and opportunity for the next gen.
Boris, do you have anything to add to that as the founder of ArchIT and just thinking about like the vision that you present to your employees, or maybe even how that's potentially changed over the years that led up to this M&A that you guys did? The ideas, I'm sure, have shifted over time, and the things that Alex was just speaking about regarding kind of setting a bigger vision. I mean, one thing about business is it's always changing. And I think that the fear that we were talking about earlier comes in because people get comfortable with the way things are. And we like to do things the way that we've done them because we know how to do it. We know how to deliver it. We know what the timelines are like. And then there's this new injection, this new opportunity coming, and that leads to some fear because things are changing. But I think at the strategic level, at the leadership level, you also recognize that business is always changing. And it's your job to guide that process and to bring people along and to build consensus on the team. How has that changed over the years as the founder of ArchIT for you?
So this is our first acquisition, and I don't know if I would have thought about the idea if, Alex wasn't that instrumental in kind of ingraining the idea in me. So props to him for that. But I can definitely see that from a standpoint of where we want to go with the company, and the 10-year vision that I had initially, and then Alex kind of joined in on. It would be much more difficult to grow organically to that, and probably even impossible. So other avenues has to be explored, and growing through acquisition is one of those. And I think it's a very successful avenue, going through one ourselves right now. I definitely can see where you take you can kind of shortcut some of the things that may take longer when you're just trying to grow organic. With that comes its own challenges, right? Like you take the shortcut, but then you bring on more people, processes break. So there's a lot of all of those other things that have to be planned out and considered. And
kind of everybody has to adjust at that point, right? It's like squeezing more pegs into the bucket. It's just like everybody has to adjust. Everybody has to get used to the new adjacent pieces. And so there's a lot of, there is an adjustment period, but it's also, one way that I've thought about this is just getting comfortable being uncomfortable and taking on the challenges of growth or new things that are happening is a constant. And so I think that to me is a constant message from leadership that should be going out is that it's important to be nimble. It's important to be adaptable. And that by putting those opportunities in play in your business kind of helps people do that, even if they're not necessarily open to doing that just on their own all the time.
I have a question, Evan. Do you work out?
Yeah, I do. I rock climb and I mountain bike. That's my fitness.
That's great. I do martial arts and all kinds of other things. Boris, I know, does a lot of walking. So we work out to keep our bodies healthy, right? Mobile,
Yeah.
to keep our mental, right? Hopefully mental energy, recharged, all that good stuff. Organizational fitness. It's the same thing. If your company does not work out, if you don't put it through, I mean, yes, there are challenges. You may get IRS audit. That's not a workout. That's a colonoscopy, gentlemen. This is workout is growth. This is where you exercise opportunities, you exercise your team, your resiliency, you build your policies and processes, you break them, you rebuild them, because as an organization moves, it's not like you have 10 people, then you have 30. It's a different organization. So processes need to be adopted. But hopefully you have that fitness where this is interesting, exciting, and the right people typically join the organization that works out. And so I just wanted to insert that piece. And this is the ultimate. So an M&A is the result of your organization's fitness, right? Are you able to run that marathon? Like, have you trained enough, or are you just bit something that you're going to choke on? And that's the piece that I think is important. And I think we all need to look at the health of our organizations and the fitness before we go buying other companies. But it's a terrific opportunity on so many levels.
Yeah.
And even, I wanted to emphasize this, Evan, even smaller companies can do it. We're not a huge company. We are 15-person, 12-person company that made this acquisition. So it's not, I want to stress this, it's not just for large giant companies out there. Because we can talk about this later. There's a way to finance this through the revenue of the company you're acquiring. And that's magic.
Well, that's a perfect segue. I think we should start to talk about how and the kind of the different things like you just mentioned about financing, and because I think it's one thing to just talk about the idea of mergers and acquisitions and what that may do for a business, how it may be able to be used as leverage for clients or portfolios or talent or all of those things. So I think one thing that we're definitely seeing in AEC is that big companies are getting bigger and small companies are staying small, and the middle is kind of going away. And so this gives an opportunity for strategic growth for important reasons, right? If you decide to go down this path, it's going to be an investment for sure, but it also has really great potential outcomes if you have a good strategy and you've got the right leadership in place and you're transparent and communicative. But let's talk about what actually is needed to go down these paths, or maybe what some different options are to go down the path of M&A.
I'd like to start with the financing, with the money piece. I think we can talk about how to find acquisition afterwards. I think I need to put people's minds at ease here, because I originally, back when I was just starting, getting into this from my other businesses, I my idea was I have to save up, $600,000 to even, be in the play.
Right.
But the reality is, there are wonderful organizations that support business growth, and one of them is Small Business Administration, SBA. You can say that bureaucracy, there, this, that, and trust me, Boris and I were athletes jumping through hoops. I mean, they have hoops with fire around them, rings, and unbelievable. Like, I'll tell you one or two stories later on if we have to. It's just unreal. But now that's fine. It's all fitness, right? Him and I are both better after this. Point is, you put 10% down, and that's all you're required if you approve for the SBA loan for the rest. Now, there's two ways to do this. So let's say we're talking about smaller company, right? Smaller company buying another smaller company. Let's say the price is, let's say it's $600,000 or $750,000. So all you have to come up with is $75,000, which is 10% from your own cash, and then the rest can be financed in two ways. Evan, first way is getting the SBA loan, which a lot of times is good because it's a 10-year loan. So they have a very specific loan product just for the specific for the M&A,
Okay.
and it's a 10-year loan product, and the interest rate is pegged against the LIBOR. Right now, it's not very good. Right now, it's not very good because the interest rates are up. But
Right.
when you listen, if you listen in 2025, hopefully, our rates have come down and it's a lot more attractive now. But yes, it's a smaller payment. It's a 10-year loan, so it's kind of affordable. The second way to finance it, or a combination, is to sell or carry. Let me explain what seller carry is. You can actually have the owners of the business you're acquiring carry the note, meaning that you can negotiate the interest rate and the period of time they're going to carry the note. So let me take back an example. You put $75,000 down. In fact, you have to, if you don't even get involved SBA, which sometimes is better, you can 100% finance it if the owner agrees, which most owners won't. But you can 100% finance it through owner carry, meaning the owner of the business that is selling to you is willing to carry the note. So you say, okay, $750,000. I'm going to carry it for 5 years at 6% interest rate, and do the math, and that's your monthly. A lot of times with seller carry, you want to the seller wants to see more cash from. It's not, they're not really willing to risk their company on your say so.
Right.
So typically, it's half and half. Seller will carry half. It depends. Sometimes, companies know each other very well and they'll agree. The big advantage for the company who's selling is the tax advantage. Because if they get all of the $750,000 at once, it's going to be a massive tax bill. It's just going to, boom, chop your legs off from under you. And, you think you're getting $750, you're getting like $350.
Yeah, right.
$400.
Yeah.
But when you finance it, it's talk to your CPA. It's a much better, it's a bigger win. So you're getting $7,000 to $20,000, $15,000 a month every month for 5 years, 10 years plus, whatever the negotiation is. So those are the two ways to finance it. You put small down payment, go with SBA. You put small down or larger down payment, go with seller carry, or do a combination. We've done a combination. We put money down, we had an SBA loan, and we had a seller carry. So we had a trifecta. We went through all the hoops.
Achievement unlocked. You did all the things.
You get a little badge.
Right.
Twitter verified.
Right. Twitter. You can now long tweet about this, about how you did this. So let's talk about, some of the how this adds leverage to small companies. So you said, Alex, that you are a small company. You acquired another small company. It could have probably gone the other way too, but you're the ones with the vision. So you're leading this. You're then finding some businesses that potentially you could acquire. You hone in on one and you start this negotiation. But before, because I do want to talk about how you actually do that, how you find companies to buy who are open to this. Maybe all companies are for sale. I don't know. Maybe not. But the idea of using that as leverage, because this changes the business plan, right? If you all of a sudden grow by 50 to 100% through an acquisition, that changes the way you approach business. I think it at least increases your opportunities in different ways. Boris, maybe do you have some ideas in there that you can share, or not ideas? Do you have examples in there that you can share of ways that ArchIT leveraged an M&A and how it might have changed how you do business?
That's actually interesting. All right. Let me think about that. Alex, do you have any ideas?
Yeah. I was going to save you with this one. But so first of all,
let me change it from Boris to Alex. So Alex, do you have examples of ways that this has changed ArchIT's business plan, your outlook, and how you go about your day-to-day operations?
First, I'd like to challenge you for 1 second on the change of the business plan. Plan never changed. We planned for this eventuality. We had a fork, right? We had a fork. We say, okay, when we do an annual planning session, we spend 2 days in a remote location, undisclosed, and then we just focus on planning. And then there's a fork, right? Here's what happens if we do this, and here's what happens if we don't.
Right.
So I wouldn't say the business plan has shifted. Absolutely, the business has shifted.
Right.
But to give you specific examples, first of all, we are bringing in like engineering talent that we didn't have before. Someone who can step in, and this was a big goal for us, a big opportunity. Someone who can step in and do what Boris does, strategic consulting, doing CIO services. We do, virtual CIO. We can do quarterly meetings with all our clients. So we're not just, changing computers and rebooting their servers.
Mm-hmm. It
It's a
actually
strategic
changes
guidance.
what you offer out there. I mean, it actually increases your value to your clients.
Right. Well, so this is the thing. The value stays the value stays the same because that's how we approach every single client is with
Right.
tender love and care.
Right.
But what it is who delivers that value. So Boris has more time to work on the business.
Mm-hmm.
This is key. This is where people fall apart because you take a lot of, like, Boris is a very, very talented guy from operational perspective, but he doesn't get to play in operations because he's busy delivering those CIO meetings with strategy meetings with clients because he's the only one in the work that can do it.
I frame this as going from working in the business to working on the business, right? And that is a big shift. And there are a lot of people who don't want to let go of the driving wheel. They don't want to stop doing the thing that they're so good at that they built their career on. There's those types. And then there's the ones who can and want to do those bigger strategic moves and affect more of the industry. And it's a different role, right? And there are people who are built for that and there are others who aren't, but it does allow you, by taking on this talent, what you're saying, Alex, is that by taking on these people who can then fulfill the working in the business part so that you can let go of the driver's wheel and work on the business is an important kind of strategy to actualize in your business to take it further.
For us, this was one of the most important things. Okay, so we got a top level engineer that we thought, and I think it's coming out as the case, he can replace and deliver quality, again, high level service to our clients, to be the escalation point so Boris can work on the business. Yes, that was a big piece for us. But also, we got a portfolio of architecture clients. Like we didn't buy a company that served plumbers and grocery stores and car dealerships. And this is why. So we're going to talk about how to find those acquisitions. Our field was so narrow. Like, we only would want to buy another IT company who served architects. Like, that doesn't. First of all, there hardly any exist. Second of all, how do you know they're for sale? And then anyway, so. But for us, it was strictly strategic from that perspective, because now we have more architecture, and we like, let's be honest, other clients we acquired knew about us. Some of them knew about us. We had good relationships with them, but they were happy with their IT service. They weren't going to switch. So for us, and for us, it was a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult to get clients because even if you're unhappy with your IT you're just gonna suffer.
Because you have,
you think it's fitness?
You have debt there, and it's like harder to take on something completely new than to just continue to suffer with the existing.
Or you think everybody is that way, right? Like, the other common misconception is like, well, this is just the way it is. I'm just, it's IT guys.
Right.
Yeah, it's IT guys. Suffering is part of the program. It's not. I just want to throw it out there. But let's get back to the conversation. So those two big advantages. The third, I'm going to round this out, Evan. The third one is however you can say, like, I'm a marketing guy. I've done marketing, digital marketing. I had a digital marketing company. I just want to preface this to the people. Like, I have depth. But to be honest with you, most of our growth is what? Referrals. We're building an ecosystem of awareness in our chosen industry, which is architects, that we're out there, ladies and gentlemen, who help you out. Here's all the help we do. We do podcasts, we do AIA sponsorships, blah, blah, blah. We do all that. But at the end of the day, most of our business, and Boris, maybe just say yay and nay, came from referrals, and we just doubled our referral network.
No.
I made a point.
I know you made a point. I didn't know if I should continue, but no, Alex is absolutely right. Basically, an acquisition and more clients expanded the network of You have more
Mhm.
clients, you deliver the services to them, you'll have more referrals, right? So you
Yeah.
basically exponentially just grew your referral net.
Yeah. So Alex, let's get into how you find companies to buy. You said you're in a niche. There aren't that many companies operating in this realm, and so maybe easier for you, maybe not. I would love for you to kind of tell the story about how you can find companies to buy who are, aligned at some level with what your goals are.
Well, I think you as a business leader or owner or whatever, partner, need to have an idea of what is it that you're looking for. In other words, like a perfect client profile is something that's needed for marketing. A perfect, M&A profile is something that's needed for this. Like if you don't think about this and don't write about this and don't talk about this, it's not going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to having a plan, right? Like we had written this down probably 3 years ago initially on our business plan that we're going to pursue growth through acquisition. We actually talked to a few people just to see what's out there, right? But as Alex said, it was very difficult to find somebody that fits, uh, you know, that has our clients, right? Like that also serve the
Mm-hmm.
architecture industry.
Mm-hmm.
So really, like with this particular acquisition, we kind of lucked into it because they found us. But as soon as we got that email, we were like, "Oh, look, because we already talked about it, right? We saw the opportunity right away. If we've never talked about this before, I'd probably send that email to junk and never look at it again."
True. I mean, how many people out there respond to a recruiter's email when they are looking versus when they are not looking, right? It's like all of the ones when they're not looking just get deleted. They just get passed by. But when you're looking, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, what's this? This is the best email I've got all day, right? And so, to your point, I think that mindset, you've got to put it into the plan so that your subconscious is working on it, because then when the opportunities present themselves, in your case, like they found you, it's like the light bulb goes off immediately and you can respond immediately to it, rather than like, oh, maybe that goes in the maybe someday or the end of the junk mail.
Let me put some framework around this. There's framework. So there's subconscious, absolutely. You think about like a yellow Corvette,
Then you're going to see
buying a
one.
yellow Corvette, you're
Yeah.
going to see them everywhere, right?
Right.
That's true, right? Selective, right? It's just our mind does selective because we can't focus on everything, so we focus on something. And this is one of those things. But there's framework. Like this wasn't just a fluke.
Right.
Here's what happened. We blog about architecture. We have a podcast about architecture. IT support for architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to conferences. We speak at webinars. We everywhere. So when you type in architecture, IT architecture in Google, ArchIT is there. Well, so what happened? Well, what happened was the company, the two founders were retiring, or they're looking to do something else or retire. One was going to stay, one was going to retire, whatever the case is. But they really cared about their clients.
Mm.
Like to them, and this was one of the cases, like, where my clients go is more important to me than potentially more favorable terms. I'm not kidding.
Mm.
The owners had really, really deep relationships with their clients.
Mm-hmm.
And we were one of the 3 firms they reached out, and none of the other 2 focused on architects.
Mm.
And so for us, as soon as we picked up the conversation, the fit was established because they realized that we are so deep in this industry. We are committed. We're not really serving anybody else, nor we have any interest to acquire them. Yeah, it happens. We have other businesses in our portfolio because of friendships and relationships and other things. We can serve other companies, but we don't actively pursue that, and we prefer to stick. In fact, we focus to stick with architecture firm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knew that, and this is what got a foot in the door, and this is where conversation started. And they instantly saw that we were super receptive, and then we actually disclosed them that, hey, this is part of our plan. You guys come in at a great time. We are capable and interested of doing this, and now let's talk.
Had you guys done other work to prepare for this opportunity? In other words, did you look into all of the different, and Alex, you have some experience with this, so maybe by default the answer is yes here, but in terms of the SBA loans and the understanding the different ways in which you could finance these kinds of opportunities should they come up, or if you had found them yourself. It seems like you kind of have to have your ducks in a row to then actually make it happen. And so you're right, it's not just like throwing it out there on a whiteboard somewhere and just saying, yeah, we're interested in doing this, but it's actually, once you say that, you can then reverse engineer that back and come up with the various steps that you need to have in place to be prepared for that thing to happen. Otherwise, they're not going to take you seriously if that were the case.
The information is out there. I belong to the group, and I'll pull the book. We'll get Boris on the next answer. I'll pull the book from my shelf and show it to everybody. But you read a book, you follow the author, you know the subject.
So, Boris, let's talk about the negotiation process. So once you find a fit, where do you go from there? As Alex can go find that book, but the idea of negotiation is, I mean, it's not an idea. Like, this is a process. This is something you have to be ready for, right? It's not going to be just, what do you want? Perfect. It's not going to fit like that, right? So tell me what it's like or what you look at when you're looking at the negotiation process of an M&A project.
Well, our negotiation process, I'll preface it by saying it was a little longer than what I would have expected initially. Because it was a smaller acquisition. So, but there were, we wanted to make sure, I guess, when you're negotiating, and just like also like leading a team of people, I think it's very important to make sure that you are providing win-win scenarios for both parties. Right? So, just like I would with my team, if they approach me and ask for some different job duties or something else, I would try to make sure that it's both a win-win for the business, a win for the business and a win for them. So similarly, in this negotiation, I always look at the other side and try to understand what would constitute a win for them and see how we can make it work. To also have our business be successful as well.
Yeah. You find your book, Alex?
No, I'm working on it.
Okay.
So the thing is, I've spent, so when I'm in the mindset of training or preparing for something, this could be a health related kick or fitness related kick, or I'm preparing for like a belt exam, martial arts, whatever the case is. I get deep into a particular subject and I do my research and I go like deep. And then what I do is I purge. Once I accomplish the goal, and that just happens to me, I don't really I retain the concepts, and
Right.
I'm terrible at retaining the actual, I'm no longer part of those groups. Like
You moved on.
migrate over to my next venture interest
Yeah.
kick,
Well,
so to speak.
like you said earlier, there's only so much room in the brain for the things that there's room for, and there's not room for everything, right? So that totally speaks to that.
Yeah, we can continue the conversation. We'll link the book in the show notes, and there's a wonderful Facebook group that's private group. People can join, and this one resource, and then everything, the outcome from that resource, because the book cites a lot of different things, white papers people can read. But at the end of the day, it just does a justice to specifically smaller to mid-sized companies acquiring other companies. Large giant M&A deals, BlackRock, whatever, family offices, all those things are they have lawyers, they have their own M&A people, they have analysts and all that stuff. We don't have any of them in a smaller company. So you need to arm yourself with knowledge, but it's not complicated. It's a lot of fun, actually. The other thing I do is I spend time. I have an email from multiple companies that offer businesses for sale. This is advice, actually. Like biz, buy, sell. You can go in. It's possible that you'll find your next potential acquisition there, but not necessary. Best companies are not listed. Best companies come to an understanding that they need to sell for whatever reason, and a lot of times they will reach out to you. Now we go back to conversation how to find. They will reach out to other companies who are potentially acquirers who are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk more about how to be that potential company. But at the end of the day, if you're looking, you put yourself in a position to get that phone call, get that notification, get that email, and then go from like we did.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to talk about it. And another thing I just want to mention is you have to flex your memberships in organizations you're in. And maybe we can talk about more about this later. But if you're in AAA, you have to talk about this to your friends and peers. Like, hey, we're looking to acquire. This is who we're looking to acquire. We're potentially, we're not looking hard, but we're open. Do you know it?
I think that's hard for a lot of architects these business things, they like to keep it in behind closed doors. They don't want to let everybody know what their strategies are because competition is so fierce. Like it is ingrained into every architecture student who's competing against their entire class from their very first design studio. And that doesn't change once they get into the professional practice, delivering projects, going after work. It's a fierce competition. And so a lot of those concepts are held close to their vest. And so I think what you're presenting right now goes contrary to how architects have been trained to think, which is like, we need to keep this to ourselves. We can't tell people. The word's going to get out. Our clients are going to get worried about what we might be going through. Our staff is definitely going to be worried about it, the fear that we talked about early. So, I mean, do you have any practical kind of comebacks or pushback on that kind of thinking that is pervasive in our industry?
Has anything extraordinary, does extraordinary things, which is M&A is extraordinary, does it happen to ordinary companies or people who stay strictly within the guidelines? So let me just remind people, first of all, you're not breaking any rules. I'm not saying, break an NDA,
Mm-hmm.
non-disclosure agreement,
Mm-hmm.
and yammer about this potential acquisition to the market and then lose the deal and get sued. Don't do that.
Shaking your finger. No.
Finger wagging for those who are listening.
Right.
Do not do that. But I think it's like, why is it taboo? I don't understand this. And you can be still respectful of the competition and all those things, and still talk about it, and still have conversations privately or at the round table at dinners. Like, hey, have you ever bought a company, or do you know this person's buying a company? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely ways to do this. I wouldn't be afraid of this at all. I was in the property management industry in the past. Spent 12 years building a company and then selling it in that industry. And guess what? Same thing. It used to be like, it used to be just, it's not some we talk about. It's not some, but guess what's happening right now? There's a huge consolidation.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That industry is going through unbelievable consolidation. A lot of VC and VC-backed players are coming in and gobbling a lot of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Now the smaller companies, banding together to withstand the fee pressure, to withstand the competition from all these I don't know, is that happening in architecture yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I was speaking earlier, big companies are getting bigger, small companies are staying small, and the middle size are going away. Why? Because the big companies are sucking them up like the vacuum that they are.
Mm-hmm. And they have a plan and they're doing it. And guess what? You could too.
Yeah.
Or you can not talk about it.
Right.
And just be, and just be quiet about it and have all the plans in the world. But unless you vocal and you are put those plans out there and share it with your team and colleagues and organizations you belong
Your
to.
network. Yeah. Right.
I think you're not going to get the opportunity. Maybe you get lucky.
Right.
I want to add something to that because, I mean, yes, architecture may be competitive, but so is IT services, right? Like we have 1,500 companies just here in the Bay Area, serving everybody. And initially when I, founded the business, I kind of had that same mindset. It's like, well, what if somebody finds out? Like, how we price things? Like, Alex was always say, price transparency. We got to put pricing on our website. Like, yeah, but everybody's honestly, it's probably the best thing that happened to us in terms of like putting pricing on the website and all the other stuff that we're doing in terms of content and kind of sharing our processes and how we do things and our secret sauce, so to speak, right? And not worrying about that others can copy, because in reality, A, if they could copy, they would already be doing it. B, they're probably already doing it. Or C, they don't even, they don't care because they have their own way of doing it and they're not going to change. Right. So,
Right.
and all of those can go together, and like, really, there's no, unless you have some secretive IP, right, where you're developing some secretive technology for NASA or something else, there's really no kind of need of keeping a lot of your business stuff a secret. Obviously, certain things have to stay confidential, but outside of that, your kind of generic plan, there shouldn't be a problem with sharing.
During the M&A process, I'm sure that there are different motivations from the acquiree and probably for the acquirer as well. So talk about transparency with what people want to get out of this deal, maybe how those things relate. How do you find out what is important and then start to address? Is that all part of alignment, or is that not as important when it comes to alignment of what kinds of companies you're looking to acquire? Because like I said, there's going to be different motivations. Some people are going to want cash out of the deal. Some people are looking for, a retirement versus the next step in their business. And so maybe you can talk about some of those different importances when it comes to what people are looking to get out of a deal like this.
I'll take this. First of all, it's buy, then build. And I just feel absolutely ashamed because this book changed the way I think about growth and added a dimension that I think will get me to my 50-year plan. Let's say I have a personal 50-year plan. It's going to be achieved through work and businesses. But at the end of the day, that's the ticket. So buy, then build, but Walker Deibel, he's got a Facebook group. Just read the book first. It's whatever, $20. Best $20 you'll spend. I'm just, he's such a great author, and he's got a lot of experience in this, and he explains everything to normal people. Like, it's not, you don't need to decode it.
All right. Well,
everything is spelled out.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. And so go back to motivations. That's what you need to find first. As an acquirer, you need to understand what the owner partners of the other company are going through multiple conversations, interviews, research. You need to become the analyst. You need to become the interviewer. You need to look at their podcasts. If they're out there on the web somewhere, listen to them, understand them. So what they say is kind of what your research shows. Because I'm not going to talk about unscrupulous people, but it does happen. So first of all, you need to be sure if there's a big lawsuit or something else going on, you need to know about it. But that's rare. A lot of times they're moving on. Like, I'm just tired of this. Like, I'm on to my next business. I'm on the next idea. And they could be older, younger people. It doesn't matter. They're on to the next thing. They want make sure their employees are taken care of, their customers are taken care of, but they really just want to get out. So speed sometimes is more important to them. A lot of times is money. They're in a financial bind, right? They're in a financial situation. They need to cash out quickly. Could be health, could be who knows what. A lot of times is retirement. Most of the times it'll be retirement. People retiring. Retiring people have different motivations. They're not in a hurry to sell this thing. They're not like, they want to find the right buyer. They're willing to carry the note because tax-wise, it's a lot more advantageous to them. Those are great businesses to buy. Anything that's moving fast, I would question. Again, took us a year from that email to to semi-finished implementation. So I'd say about 8 months to close the deal.
Yeah.
8 to 9 months.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the timeline we all should expect. I think it's normal.
Well, tell me about this idea of a clawback clause. What does that mean?
This is something I've learned. Walker, does he have it in his book? This is from my previous experience. So the clawback clause, I don't know if it's as relevant for architecture companies. Here's why. Does architecture companies have recurring revenue, or do they?
In a way, you have recurring clients. There are some architecture companies who offer architecture as a product. In that case, they may or may not, but I think pretty much it's dollars for services, and so I wouldn't really ever count that as recurring revenue.
Yeah. So then the clawback clause does not really apply. This is for services like IT, like property management, where there's recurrent revenue in play.
Mhm.
And if you lose clients, so you're buying that recurrent revenue stream, but if 50% of the clients leave,
Mm,
what did you just buy?
right, right.
And so I think it's less relevant for the architecture,
Okay.
the engineering design space, where it's one-off contracts, repeat clients, yes, but you can't commit them to servicing with you.
Okay. Let's start to wrap up here and talk about maybe like the final, and this can go on for as long as it needs to take. There's no time expectation here, because I think this is probably where I may have the most to add to the conversation regarding integration. So like there's like closing the deal of the M&A, and then there's the actual integration. And this goes back to where we started the conversation. Like there's the big strategy, there's the big vision, but then there's also the nuts and bolts integration part, and that can go really well. It can go horribly wrong, right? When it comes to, because if you're especially in architecture, I think a lot of firms operate in a Wild West kind of, it's like you're always putting out fires, you're always working on deadline, and it's like just go constant. And so infusing new people, new processes and workflows into that, maybe even servicing new clients on an ongoing basis that aren't used to the way that you do things. If you're the acquirer, I could see how, there's a lot of integration challenges here. So there's a branding cohesiveness that needs to happen. There's messaging out to all of the clients about what's going on and how things will continue. And there's a lot of different kind of moving parts here. And really, people are going to see this as the beginning of the next steps rather than the end of the M&A process, right? It's kind of where it all begins for a lot of people. So talk through closing and integration and rebranding and transitioning and leadership. And I mean, there's a lot we could talk about here. So again, like no constraints on time, but this is kind of where the rubber meets the road.
Well, I'm going to start this, but Boris, I want you to take this to more granular level. Entrepreneurs solve problems, right? Problems means something failed, and it needs fixing, needs rethinking, needs reimagining, needs rework. If it's not for you, don't do it. Because yes, you're running already fast and hitting deadlines. But I'll be honest with you, like if that's a normal state of business, why would you want to double that?
Right. Good point.
You go to a doctor with a heart attack, God forbid. I'm just saying, like, okay, the house needs to be in order.
Mm-hmm.
Step one, one dumpster fire, you add another one, it's not going to be all of a sudden, a pleasant cafe. It's just going to be the same. So I want to say this, be okay to solve problems. We always fail. Businesses, it's okay to have a failure, a constant failure rate in the business, because that's what I call fitness, right? When you're constantly fixing problems. It's not okay to run around and absolutely go from a big fire to the big fire, burning through people, getting things out and thinking acquisition is going to solve it. I don't think so. Even I don't care how strategic it is. I don't care how much talent you buy. They're going to take one look at what you got and quit. So unless you make it attractive for them to work in your organization, I think we go back to the square. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I've seen an example just to build on what you just said about quitting. Like, I think I've heard stories about firms who have purchased firms and it didn't go well, and then in the next one, they put in a clause into people's contracts where they'll get a bonus if they stay with the company for a couple of years, for example. And then as soon as they get that bonus and that couple of years is up, they're gone. Right. And so it was like a Band-Aid. It was just a temporary patch. It didn't actually work to solve the integration issues that we're talking about. And I think from an IT standpoint, and this is kind of where I dovetail into this conversation here, working on digital practice and mergers and acquisitions and people using softwares and workflows and standards that are different. It's all pieces of the puzzle that are very important. And something you said early on, Boris, was that leadership needs to acknowledge all of these various puzzle pieces, all of the moving parts, and help the leaders of those pieces of the company come together to solve this problem for the bigger business case and actually ensure that that can happen in a smooth way, that they first acknowledge it, but then actually help accomplish those goals, and don't just say, that's not something we care about. All we care about is the big strategy. They have to care about those little pieces too. Can you talk about some of those as far as the integration of, let's just talk about it from a technology standpoint. There's obvious differences in the way people use technology, their adoption of technology. Maybe they've got great habits. Maybe they've got bad habits. Maybe they've got standards. Maybe they don't, right? Maybe everybody has their own standards that's coming over. And so that becomes kind of a digital nightmare of sorts, trying to kind of figure all of that out. But I think a lot of people have lived through that as well. And so it's not as uncommon as we may hope, right? I think less common is actually a smooth transition process.
I think it's one of the things I mentioned before is leadership needs to be fully involved. Another thing is planning. Like it still goes back to like those thoughts that weave through this whole process. You always have to have a plan. So when we haven't finished, haven't signed the final docs yet, we had an estimated closing date, and like 3 months before we started planning for this event. What if it's going to happen? What are we going to do? How our processes are going to change? At least for myself, I started doing that because basically, as Alex mentioned, we grew by about 50%. So everything we have done pre-acquisition, like we're now re-engineering and incorporating new things, just because it no longer works properly, or we have to update it and we have to innovate of how we do certain things and maintain information, because small group of people maintains information a certain way, larger group of people needs a lot more process to be put around that. So like on the tactical side, right, some of the challenges is, you're absolutely right. People from another organization are coming in with their own standards and their own ideas about how to do certain things, and also how to service clients, right, or how to deliver projects. So
Right.
I think initially our plan has always been, look, we want to have the least possible interruption to what the client service delivery looks like. So I think that's very important too, is it doesn't necessarily matter what the process on their side is. We need to maintain that process at least temporarily for X amount of time. We can say whatever, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, depending on how long those projects take to deliver. Obviously, in our case, the life cycle is shorter. If there's a 2-year project, those clients are already used to the way that project gets delivered. So you want to make sure you maintain that side of it, right? So the company that's being acquired needs to maintain their processes on that side. And then you can slowly migrate to using your processes or combining the processes. Like we have, as I mentioned before, I kind of lead from a standpoint of asking people for input. So we've actually implemented quite a few things that, the other company was using and we were not either aware of or were not using before. But they brought that in, and I was like, look, this is going to make our lives a lot easier. Let's put this in and let's get going.
Take the best of both worlds, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the,
Right.
from my perspective, that's the only way to do it.
Well, and that gives everybody ownership at some level, right? It's like, well, you take the best from here, you take the best from here, you combine that, we're even better together now. We made something that we couldn't have made before out of the best parts of both of these things. I think that's really strong, and that's a great thing to shoot for, and understanding that those opportunities exist from both sides of this equation.
I want to add a couple things of it, if I may. One is having a plan in place is key, and we keep harping on this, but like, all right, you got to like bring in your partners into this, right? In other words, if you're IT partner, right, you're an architect, you're buying another architecture company, they use Revit, you use something else. Well, there's technical aspect to this. So your plan can say, well, we're going to migrate to Revit. We wanted to do it anyway, so we're just going to go ahead and grab Revit and use their license and just expand, right? And then, okay, let's just say like we'll just put finger out there and say, oh, it's going to take 3 months. Well, you need to bring in your IT partners. You need to explain the scope, and you need to actually have a plan in place where your IT partners will give you information on how long it's going to take and the effort it's going to require, and a retraining and all that is involved. And that's the same thing for accounting. Don't think accounting is that, that changes too. They're using QuickBooks Online, using QuickBooks. You think, oh, it's just QuickBooks. No, it's not. It's QuickBooks Online. It's a different freaking animal than QuickBooks. We've learned that. I've learned that. There's also brand piece. Okay, so brand piece, bringing your marketing people. As a smaller companies, you don't have marketing people. Might be a good to buy dinner for your friend who's in marketing. It's a great idea to run things by him. Again, put that into the plan. And the plan is, I'm going to just give some meat on the bone. Okay, you want meat? I'll give you meat. So sunsetting the brand is key. Okay, so you're buying another company. The obsessive thing we all need to think about is well-being and continuity for the clients.
Yeah, and perception, right?
Mess
'Cause
with that
communication, that perception is a huge piece of the positive outcomes coming to fruition, because they are your livelihood, right?
Absolutely. And that's how you're going to finance that. That's what you did in the first place. And so be obsessed about continuity and quality product delivery, service delivery to those clients you're buying. And, take them to dinner, have conversations. Don't be afraid to spend your own time. This is important. Invest in that. Finally, we all going to want to put our little shingle on that building and say, oh, it's now us. We're so good. We're buying companies. I'd say hold off on that. Have a plan to sunset the brand you're acquiring. And my plan is very, very simple. Like, it's a 3-step process. First, you don't do nothing. That company remains this company. The name remains the name, and a new client's going to knock on that door. Now, you already integrated and still have a service delivery that's through your company, but there's a shingle and name, because you don't want to mess with all of the gains they've made over the years, right? All of the marketing, all of the relationships they've built. Don't do that just yet. So I'd say 6 to 12 months. Just keep that, operate the storefront as if it's them, even though you are fully integrated, right? On the back end. Make sense,
Yeah,
Evan?
totally.
Next step is add a little byline. So still keep it them. You may want to do some website redesign. You may want to do some building redesign, whatever. But it's X company by your company. So you start to introduce that you're part of this, or part of this group, or how companies say do this, right? So John's Architecture, a Rapoport company, right? Let's say you are the Rapoport company. So that's how it works. And then finally, the third phase of transition is now you bring it into your fold completely, and that may not even be necessary, to be honest with you. But typically after 2 years or so, year and a half, everybody already knows this. You got the momentum. You can there's a technical side of this, right? You can forward all the URL, like a website URL, to your website and just ingest it completely. At 2 years from now, it should be okay. But that's the brand transition. In sort of like highlight.
I think what we're used to seeing, at least on the tech side of things, is these giant companies swallowing up smaller companies, and an email goes out and the website shuts down. Those people have been consumed into the mothership, and it's like, it just looks like it happened like that on the outside, right? And obviously that's not what's been going on the inside for a while, but the perception is this service that I relied on is gone. It's shut down. Or Google had this service that I've been using for 10 years and they just shut it down because it wasn't working for them anymore, because it wasn't providing the ad revenue that they needed to keep it going, right? And so I think what you're painting a very different picture there of a service industry that we operate within as architects and engineers and IT professionals. You're providing a service. The timelines should be longer. Don't look at what happens, at least our perception of what happens in tech as the model here. This is a different timeline to be looking at. I think it's great that you actually pointed that out, because this is based on relationships, right? The whole service industry that we're a part of is based on those relationships, and it does take hand holding, and it does take kind of crafting and doling out these bits of the breadcrumb trail over a period of time so that it's really digestible by everybody, doesn't take people by surprise, then it doesn't cause fear. And that's an important part of the strategy of the overall M&A process.
For sure. It is for sure an important part, because if you jerk things around, you will end up with less than you originally wanted.
Well, what are we missing here? What piece of the story, what piece of the puzzle have we not touched on? Is there anything that you want to throw in here as we wrap up this episode? It's incredibly amazing that you guys are sharing this information with everybody, because like Alex, you talked about that book being kind of a masterclass. I mean, this could be transformative for people's businesses. This could be the kind of information that you're sharing I love that you're doing it. It's a resource that people can use for a very long time. And so I really appreciate you both taking the time to put this together and tell this story to the audience. And obviously my hope is this goes way beyond the audience, that this episode gets shared with firm leadership who don't listen to this podcast, and people who, because even if it's not something that they're considering, it's really educational, and it's the kind of thing that could be an option in the future if it's not right now. And so this is my goal with this whole show, is to put these conversations that people have, around a table in a room, out to everybody, and make it a resource for all. So I appreciate you doing that. And I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything in our conversation that needs to get out there in this episode.
I want to say two things. One is, if you are a future leader in the organization and you find out that your organization is buying another company, or your organization is being sold to a company, I'd say if you want to move your career forward, and if you like the company you're working with or for, I'd say volunteer to help. Volunteer to help. Stand up and raise your hand and say, hey, I know Revit. I know this. I know that. I know, most of our clients. I can help with X, Y, Z. And don't just ask once and expect your leadership to just embrace you and say yes constantly, because they have other things they worry about. Their plan maybe not calling for anybody internally to help you. Whatever the case is, I'd say if you want to build your career and become indispensable in your organization and future leader in your organization, step up. And once you find out the acquisition, don't resist, offer your help, and offer it often. Okay. That's one thing. From a leadership perspective, fork out before you do anything. We consider buying companies. Fork out part of your business plan and say, what if we acquire? How does that going to look like? So you don't have to create an elaborate Excel models, but do map it out in your brain and write it, and start talking about it. Then it will happen. So those are the two pieces.
Any last thoughts from you, Boris, before we wrap it up here?
I'm just gonna say, be open to the idea, right, and plan on, make that a part of a strategic discussion when you have, your strategic offsites, or however you're doing strategic planning at the firm. Have it as part of strategic discussions, and really look at it as a realistic avenue for growth.
Great. Well, again, thank you both for taking the time to share this information. Again, my hope is that this is a resource for people out there. I know that's your goal with it as well. It's not just to show how cool you are at ArchIT, having gone through this process, but there's a learning opportunity for everyone out there in the service industry, that this is an option. There's some people who want to potentially be acquired. There are other companies who want to do the acquiring. And I think that audience, I'm hoping, hears this message. So thanks, guys, for taking the time today. And we'll put links to the book, to ArchIT, to to both of your LinkedIn profiles in the show notes, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Fantastic show, Evan. Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for having us. Have a great day.